What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Echo and the Bunnymen, and we're moving toward the end of their 1987 self-titled album. Thank you, as always, to Amber. And is it the penultimate track? I think it's the second to last tune. Let me make sure that's right. Yes, the second to last tune is Satellite, which I just reacted to a later, 1994, Alison Moyet tune of the same name. And I've also reacted to a much earlier Depeche Mode tune, or not much earlier, but 5 years earlier, Depeche Mode track. So in that regard, I'm probably going to say a very similar intro. I'm guessing there's no relation to either the earlier Depeche Mode tune or the later Allison track. But yes, to give a quick description of my understanding of the word, a satellite is an entity that orbits a larger entity, and whether you're talking astronomically or figuratively in terms of a person who's a satellite around another person, maybe more significant, stronger, maybe in terms of an institution, meaning they're not a proper member or they're not directly involved, but they're around the edges, around the perimeter of whatever's taking place or whatever the organization is. It speaks to someone who's involved. They're pulled in by the gravity of this stronger and or more central entity, but they do have a degree of separation. So all of that is great fertile ground for some metaphorical or figurative meaning, maybe a more direct and literal reference, perhaps speaking to the moon around the earth or something like that. So I'll see what I can catch on a first listen. This is Echo and the Bunnymen. The track is Satellite, and it's from their 1987 self-titled album. Percussion, dynamic, different drums and cycles across the course of the track. Indeed, I particularly enjoyed that section where it was like tom rolls with these organ style keyboard lines. It was like after the first verse and then leading into the second one, I think. I really enjoyed that, but again, multiple cycling drums over the course of the tune, and then finishing with like, cymbal cycles and some, like hand drums and so on. So a really dynamic tune, incredible vocals from McCulloch, like the like passion, the intensity that he was singing with was really cool. So shout out to Ian for that one. And lyrically, I feel like it actually is more literal. Now, of course, there might still be layered figurative meaning, but a satellite, like a electromechanical satellite that humans build and send into orbit around Earth, it sounds like there's something that's coming into the atmosphere and thus, lighting up the way that things passing into the atmosphere do because of the friction of the atmosphere. So whether it's a satellite proper, a comet, a shooting star, which is to say a meteor, or some other astrophysical phenomena, it sounds like it's calling to people, maybe in the sense like drawing their attention, but it is quite literally falling, which is to say it's within the gravitational pull of Earth and in a way that is not sustainable, meaning like an orbit is fundamentally like constantly falling toward the larger gravitational entity, but your trajectory and speed is such that you never fall inside it. You just keep falling around it. But if the angle or the speed is different, you'll ultimately be pulled into the atmosphere, and thus, the friction and the heat will cause like fire essentially, and thus it becomes this visually arresting landmark, or what's the right word? I'm trying to think. There's like a technical term, but yes, an attraction in the sky, and thus it feels like maybe there's an ambiguity. And maybe there's, again, an allure, but also a recognition that it is falling and it could land on people, which, is a real worry about space junk, as they say, like derelict satellites that don't work anymore, and, over long arcs of time, like the trajectory keeps, like, by a half degree, to the point where eventually the angle is such that they will re-enter the atmosphere and fall and crash to the ground. So yeah, it feels like it is maybe more directly referring to a literal satellite, but also there's some, psycho-emotional perception going on from the narrator, so I don't quite know how to take it on. But again, McCulloch's vocals, very enjoyable. There's some great guitar work. There was like a nice little bass rhythm at the bottom of the track, so a lot happening sonically in a very dynamic tune, and that it wasn't just like, intro, verse, chorus, outro, everything bookended. There was a real like progression and dynamic evolution over the course of the track sonically. So a very cool one. When we come back next time, it'll be the final tune on the album, which is All My Life. So yeah, I'll think more about that title when it comes, but thank you again to Amber, and again, after this, we will jump back in time. So looking forward to more Echo. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.